It is City Club's pleasure to welcome you to tonight's debate featuring two contenders for Multnomah County District Attorney, Mike Schmidt and Nathan Vasquez. For more than 100 years, Portland City Club has hosted public forums, debates, and conducted research to help Portlanders make informed decisions around elections and public policy. City Club is committed to providing space for people to gather and engage in civil dialogue and civic dialogue as well. Members like you make City Club run by providing ideas, leading discussions and conversations, conducting research, and contributing to our community. To volunteer for any of our committees, including the programming committee, our research board, or a specific research study, or an issues committee, please become a member today. You can do so by visiting pdxcityclub.org/membership and let us know how you'd like to engage. We welcome you to our public square and thank you for your support now and into the future. For today's program, with special thanks to Bobby Regan, co-chair of the City Club's programming committee, for putting this program together. A special thanks also to Kayla Kennett, City Club's communications manager, for her technical support tonight. We have quite a few things going on at City Club, and we want to make sure that you mark your calendars for 3 more City Club programs this month. The first is a virtual debate featuring 2 candidates, Jamie McLeod-Skinner and Janelle Bynum, who are vying for the Democratic candidate seat for Oregon's Congressional District 5 race. One of them will take on the current Republican congressperson in the seat, Lori Chavez DeRemer, and that debate will be at 5:00 p.m. on April 11th. Next, on Friday, April 19th at 5 p.m., the City Club hosts a debate featuring 2 Democratic candidates running for Oregon State Treasurer in November, Elizabeth Steiner and Jeff Goodman. If one of those candidates garners 50% of the vote during this primary election, they win. And this is an in-person debate that is at PSU's University Place. Finally, on April 29th, Multnomah County Chair Jessica Vega-Peterson will give her annual State of the County address in person at OMSI at 7:30 a.m. You can register for all 3 of these upcoming programs at the City Club website at pdxcityclub.org. And now for tonight's program, district attorneys, who are also known as prosecutors, are responsible for seeking justice for crime victims. In this role, they routinely work with law enforcement agencies to investigate crimes, determine whether charges should be filed, and prosecute cases in court. They must also protect a defendant's right through due process and a fair trial. As a lawyer myself, this is a very important issue to me. And district attorneys play an important role in shaping criminal justice policy. They provide expert advice and data to lawmakers to inform decisions that impact our criminal justice system. Tonight, we greatly appreciate the participation of our 2 candidates, Multnomah County District Attorney Mike Schmidt and Multnomah County Senior Deputy District Attorney Nathan Vasquez. They each will have the opportunity to introduce themselves during their opening remarks. And just so everyone knows, a candidate's appearance tonight does not constitute their endorsement by the City Club of Portland, but we are hosting this forum to inform you all about what these candidates care about. Additionally, our moderator has not endorsed either party. And now I'd like to introduce our tonight's moderator, Conrad Wilson, who is a reporter and producer at Oregon Public Broadcasting, where he covers justice and legal affairs. Conrad started his career by overseeing a small news department at a public radio station in Western Colorado before working for Minnesota Public Radio and then moving on to OPB in 2014. His work regularly airs on NPR programs such as Morning Edition and All Things Considered. He's also written for ProPublica and Business Week. Thank you, Conrad, for being here and welcome. Before I turn the forum over to Conrad, I'm just going to go over tonight's rules of engagement. So each candidate will be given 2 minutes for introductory remarks, and then our moderator will pose questions and allow each candidate to respond for 2 minutes. Conrad may ask one question for each candidate to answer, or he may ask each candidate a separate question on a related topic. In addition, registrants to this program were given the opportunity to send in questions in advance, and Conrad will ask 2 to 3 audience-based questions. He will also rotate the sequence of candidate questions. If a candidate chooses to respond to or challenge something said by their current opponent, they are welcome to do so during that time allotted for their next response. Candidates will also be able to see how much time they have left for each question, and we ask candidates to be respectful of the time limits that we have for our audience and for each other. So at the conclusion of the questions, each candidate will also have 2 minutes for final remarks. And those are the rules. And we're very excited to have this debate tonight. Thank you again to our candidates and Conrad. And now I'm going to turn it over to you.
Well, thank you, Amira. And thanks to the City Club for hosting this debate. Most importantly, thanks to all of you, our viewers, for joining us. The Multnomah County District Attorney is the top law enforcement officer in the county. Given that Multnomah County is the most populous county in Oregon, the role of the Multnomah County DA carries significant weight. Mike Schmidt and Nathan Vasquez, thank you both for your current work in the law enforcement arena. We appreciate your participation here tonight. Let's begin with our opening remarks. We're going to do opening statements first, and each candidate is going to have 2 minutes. Before the debate, there was a raucous match of rock, paper, scissors. District Attorney Mike Schmidt won and decided he wanted to go first, which means that Nathan Vasquez will go first during closing remarks at the end of the debate. So with that, Mike, you have 2 minutes for introductory remarks.
Great. Well, thanks, Conrad, and thank you to City Club for having us. Thank you to everyone who's tuning in at home for this important conversation. On May 21st, voters will make an absolutely critical decision. At its core, this election is about us deciding together whether we want to move forward to better days or go backwards. We're facing very real public safety challenges. We emerged from social distancing to see open drug use on our streets, making public spaces feel less safe and less welcoming. I got to work with the legislature to craft new laws to fix Measure 110, adding a new misdemeanor for possession to stop public use and bringing much needed funding for a 24-hour drop-off center to Multnomah County. As this new law goes into effect, you will see our streets and parks become more welcoming again. We saw local businesses that we loved struggling with graffiti and theft, and sometimes even closing down due to a variety of factors, including crime. These local businesses are a major part of what makes our community what it is. So I partnered with law enforcement to launch a task force to go after organized retail theft. And now we're turning the tide and catching and prosecuting those who are harming these businesses. Our neighbors are experiencing car thefts. These thefts are a major blow. I know from talking with victims that a car is a lifeline to work, medical appointments, and the grocery store. I helped legislators craft a new law to disrupt the stolen catalytic converter market. And now we see catalytic converter thefts are down 89%. And I partnered with police to launch an auto theft task force, and now car thefts are down 25.5%. There is progress being made, and there's also so much more work to do. We're not done until all feel healthy and safe in our community, and I'm dedicated to continuing to do what it takes to get us to where we need to be. My opponent, on the other hand, doesn't have much of a clear platform. He's bought and paid for by NRA champion and machine gun owner Betsy Johnson and her Rolodex and takes money from Trump donors. His campaign is about the interests of a very small group of people. I think that's why he'd rather spread fear and misinformation than tell us what his actual plans are. Tonight, I'll tell you what my plans are.
Thank you, District Attorney Mike Schmidt. Senior Deputy District Attorney Nathan Vasquez, you have 2 minutes for opening statements.
Just waiting for the timer to start. Okay.
Yes.
Well, good evening, everyone, and thank you to the City Club, and thank you to all that are here to join us. I'm going to start off by telling you a little bit about myself so that you can get to know me. I am the grandson of a Mexican immigrant who came to this country back a long time ago and grew up on the streets of San Francisco and put himself through medical school. And the reason I explain that is because he was a huge figure in my life. My grandfather became a doctor, a community doctor, and I got to see that example of his service to the community as he served the migrant community because he spoke Spanish and, quite frankly, because he took payment in chicken and eggs. He was someone that really believed in helping others, and he instilled that into me. He paid for my college with a simple request that I pay it forward. And so when I came to Portland in 1998, for law school at Lewis and Clark, it was my desire to serve. And I was so fortunate to get an internship at the Multnomah County DA's office in 2000. And that was where my service began. And so for the past 24 years, because I've never left, I have been serving this community diligently in every facet, handling domestic violence, gang prosecution, juvenile law. I did 3 years of prosecuting child abuse, and I handled for the past decade some of our most complex murder cases in our county. I'm the only one here tonight that has actually done serious trial work, and I'm the only one that can bring the experience necessary to deliver change in our community. I'm running for DA because I know we can do better. We can be compassionate and we can hold people accountable. Under Mike Schmidt, sadly, we've become unsafe, and his failed policies, particularly his deep support of Measure 110, which brought us these problems, and his mismanagement of our office has resulted in the reason why we are struggling so much. I know that together we can move forward, but we need to make a change now. Let's prioritize victims. Let's work together for community safety, and together we can make a safer community. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nathan. Nathan, the first question's to you, and you alluded to some of this in your opening remarks, but can you tell us a little bit more about what made you want to become a prosecutor, become a member of law enforcement? Why was that something that you sought?
Yeah. Well, thank you for the question. It is something that has really been ingrained into me from just as a child, watching that example of my grandfather, his service really was something that inspired me. And when I went to college, I got my degree in political science, but it was with an emphasis in public service. And so for me, I went to law school, I tried different types of law out, and they just didn't speak to me at all. And it was like watching paint dry, sadly. But what happened is when I went into the DA's office in 2000, I worked under Mike Shrunk, and he had a simple edict of do the right thing for the right reasons. And I've really ingrained that into me. And when I went to work there, I would get there at 7 a.m. Sometimes I wouldn't leave until 8 o'clock at night, and it would seem like a blink of an eye because I got to go in and I fought for victims every day. I served them. I served our community. And it's something that became a passion for me. And what I have always decided and put out is that I want to use my life skills, my profession, to help the community. I raised my 2 kids here. They both go to Portland Public Schools. And for me, it's essential that I am a part of helping provide a healthy and safe community. And to do that, for me, working with law enforcement has been very natural. Over the past 20 years, I've built partnerships from top to bottom, all the way from the U.S. Attorney's Office down to the everyday street officer. That's why I'm so proud that they've endorsed me. All the law enforcement agencies, including the firefighters as well, have endorsed me throughout our entire county because they've seen my 20 years plus of work, and they know that I deliver results to this county and to the everyday victim that I serve. And I'm happy to say that I also have supportive victims, something that you won't see on the other side. And this is why I've dedicated my life to this and to this community.
Thank you, Nathan. Mike, just a similar question. I mean, tell us a little bit about why you wanted to become a prosecutor, why you wanted to become district attorney. Is there a moment that stands out or a person that kind of encouraged you to do that?
Yeah, for me, my first job out of college was a high school teacher in New Orleans, in the public schools of New Orleans, before Hurricane Katrina came through and really hit that city. My students in the public school system in New Orleans is still pretty segregated. My students were predominantly Black. And it was my first experience really seeing how the criminal justice system played in their everyday lives, how impactful it was. They were victims of crime. Some of them were children of parents who were incarcerated. And unfortunately, a couple of them ended up being defendants themselves, one wrongfully accused. And I saw what that meant when that happened to him and what he functioned, how that impacted his school function. So I got the opportunity to intern at the district attorney's office when I was in law school. And I felt like this is some place where I can make a difference. I can be the person who sees my students when they come through the criminal justice system and wants to do something different. I did that work for 5 years, and then I got out and I worked in the legislature where I got to see where policy intersects with the work of the prosecutor's office. And then I ran the state's Criminal Justice Commission, a kind of a think tank for public safety policy in the state of Oregon that funds the things that work. And so with all of that experience coming into this role, I've been able to bring together broad coalitions of folks to work on some of our most pressing challenges, like auto and retail theft, like catalytic converter theft, how we change those laws. Gun violence, we've partnered with OHSU to study gun violence so we can get ahead of it. And also similarly, increasing our prosecution rates every single year I've been in office. And I'm running again because there's so much more work to do. We want to continue to expand our groundbreaking treatment courts that we've gotten off the ground. We got to see the implementation of House Bill 4002. And then I want to establish and grow a domestic violence center diversion program that we're just getting off the ground now.
Great, thank you. Mike, the second question is to you first. Several billboards erected during the past year have stated, quote, "Portland is a Schmidt show," along with a picture of you, district attorney. They've indicated you're responsible for empty jail beds, record crime, and fewer prosecutions. And I'm curious your response to some of the claims and what your reaction has been to seeing your face on billboards like this.
Well, as a human being, seeing your face 4 stories high is definitely a weird feeling. But when I read the claims and the statements, I mean, they're so full of misinformation. Unfortunately, that misinformation continues to be repeated today in this campaign by my opponent. But when you look at things like the saying that we haven't prosecuted crime, every single year I've been in the district attorney, we've increased our prosecution rates. And I'll tell you, when I got started in the office as an intern in 2007, we had about
City Club Breeze Center. That's great. Perfect. Okay, great. So Mike, I'm going to give you a minute to kind of finish your answer there, but to re-ask the question, several billboards erected during the past year have stated, quote, "Portland is a Schmidt show," along with a picture of you. They've indicated you're responsible for empty jail beds, record crime, and fewer prosecutions. And I was just asking you kind of your response to some of the claims and really what the reaction has been to seeing your face on a billboard. And you had talked about, I'll let you answer from there.
Yeah, great. Well, I think, first of all, what they're trying to do is misrepresent and characterize challenges that every single city has faced across the country throughout the pandemic, as if those are related to one individual's actions. When you look at prosecution rates, our prosecution rates are now at 7- and 8-year highs. We've built back the office. We now have almost as many prosecutors today as we had when I got started. So that's allowed us to spread out caseloads. When it comes to using jail beds, there's an entire criminal justice system at work here. You have the sheriff who runs the jails. You have police who have to make arrests. You have prosecutors who do the prosecutions. All these things have to work in concert. And as we're seeing with public defender shortage, we're having cases dismissed because the state's failing to appoint public defenders to handle those cases. So these are vast oversimplifications, and they're relying on spreading misinformation and fear, which is exactly what my opponent's campaign is all about. These are nuanced and complex issues.
All right. Next question, Mike, goes to you. You were elected overwhelmingly in May 2020 with more than 75% of the vote. At the time, you staked out the position as a progressive prosecutor. My understanding is that there isn't really any one definition of what a progressive prosecutor is, but generally it's been associated with kind of outsiders, lawyers who've not really traditionally been prosecutors, who have been elected and really see ways the criminal justice system has been used unfairly, often disproportionately affecting communities of color. Nationally, the movement of progressive prosecutors has also received pushback in recent years, and we're thinking of San Francisco. So this first question is just a yes or no. Do you consider yourself a progressive prosecutor?
I do.
And so what programs have you started and still run that align with the progressive platform you came in on?
Well, you know, first and foremost, let's talk about what progressive prosecution actually means and what it means to me. It means problem solving. It means somebody who looks at the research and looks at the data. We've got decades of data to show us that our policies in the past have failed us. We've led to massive disparity. We're the most incarcerated nation on the planet. It's not even close, and we're not the safest. So when I talk about being a progressive prosecutor, it's about doing the things that actually work and not just the soundbite rhetoric. So the things that I've done since being the district attorney, I think there's things that I started immediately, like our justice integrity unit. We went from processing about 1,500 expungements a year to we did 11,000 in the first year after there was a law change. It's a massive increase in people's ability to get their records cleared. These are people who have earned it so they can get jobs and housing. We've also done some law changes around the Justice Integrity Unit so that now we have a community advisory board that reviews people's applications to us about whether or not other convictions ought to be removed from the record so they can get those jobs and move on with their careers. We have our MAPS program, which is a retread of an older program, the Neighborhood Prosecutor Program. But that's something that prosecutors across the country have embraced, is getting prosecutors into our community spaces to be problem solvers. Similarly, as we've seen other challenges come up like gun violence in our community, I've partnered with OHSU to study gun violence, something that's been prevented in this country by NRA for decades. And now we're working with OHSU, and we're working with religious leaders, teachers, epidemiologists to see how can we get in front of things. So it really is a philosophy about problem solving. Same thing with our auto theft and retail theft task forces. We're asking what works and then how do we make an impact? And we're seeing on all of these interventions, we're getting good results.
Thank you, Mike. Nathan, same question. Do you consider yourself a progressive prosecutor? Just a yes or no?
Yes.
And you are a longtime prosecutor. You pointed out you've been with the office really since the beginning of your for the bulk of your legal career. Do you believe it's the district attorney's role to improve criminal justice outcomes for marginalized communities? And if so, do you think there are any programs in Multnomah County that are currently doing that?
Well, first, yes, I do believe in reducing those disparities, but I want to take a moment to address a few things. You know, when we talk about being progressive, there is nothing progressive about multiple gender discrimination claims. You know, the current elected DA has had at least 4 different claims of discrimination and retaliation. And I, for one, will just tell you straight out, I don't believe that's progressive at all. And I think that's something that we should all be looking at very critically when we talk about who is progressive and who is not. When we talk about these programs, you know, it's important also to look at that have things worked. And when we look at Mike Schmidt's, you know, have things worked under Mike Schmidt for the past 4 years, what we see is clearly record crime rates. These things aren't working. It's not working for our community. His policies have failed. When we talk about do things work, he was a huge supporter of Measure 110. He was the cheerleader of Measure 110. Did that work? Because we've had record overdose deaths. Both in 2022, we had 500 people die in Multnomah County. And in 2023, 600 people. There's nothing progressive about that. You know, this is when we look at are the things that he's done working, I'll tell you the clear answer is no. And all we need to do is look at the record crime across the board, the issues within the district attorney's office, and throughout what we're seeing is a failure of policies and mismanagement. Now, when it comes to what I want to do, I'll be clear. You know, I have been a leader in the office in the strategic prosecution unit, and that is something where it is a true opportunity for the future of prosecution. And I intend, as the elected DA, to bring that forward throughout the entire office. But through that, you can actually use the data to track and look specifically where it's working and where it's not. And so if there are disparities due to you know issues affecting minority communities, then we can correct that. It's actually embracing strategic prosecution in which we'll see real progress.
And kind of keeping with the same theme, Nathan, with progressive prosecutors, you know, through that lens, are there decisions District Attorney Schmidt has made that you would have handled differently? And if so, could you give us a specific example?
Certainly, there are multiple decisions there, and it's hard to really kind of narrow it down into a few. But one of the biggest ones was the protest policy. It was a failure. It broke relationships with with law enforcement, but it also caused issues throughout what was happening, where we had peaceful protesters, but yet then his policy really allowed for the people that didn't want to be peaceful to come in and really take advantage of that and really turned us in a negative direction. And what I'll tell you is that that was certainly a failed policy where, I was left kind of having to stand on stage with him when he announced it and kind of come back and pick up the pieces and say, here's what we can prosecute. And I went and I worked hard for the next few years to try to actually fight against people like the Proud Boys. I'm the only prosecutor here that actually stood up against them in court and actually convicted them. I stood up also against Antifa when they smashed the windows of the Oregon Historical Society. I mean, these are some direct things where you need a prosecutor with real experience, as opposed to someone who puts out kind of an ill-advised policy that had really a whole plethora of negative consequences for the community. And I look at, really a series of other decisions he's made. And one of the easy ones is his approach to commutations has been wildly off the mark. He has left victims behind in that discussion and has done a very poor job. I believe in the Justice Integrity Unit, and it should be a valuable part of the office. But sadly, he used that really to forward some violent criminals getting out of prison, people that committed aggravated murder, without really bringing in victims to have their say with these very important cases for our community. And it's a situation where, we should really look at carefully, why does experience matter? It's because of these very decisions.
Mike, your tenure in public office during the past nearly 4 years has coincided with a historically challenging time for the country, the state, and the county. Is there a decision you made during that time that you look back on now and may have done differently? And if so, could you give us an example?
Well, first, I'm going to respond to some of the things that my opponent said. The idea that he's a progressive prosecutor is laughable. He would be the first one in the nation to be bankrolled by mega GOP donors and other people who are working with the NRA. I mean, this is like not something that would be possible. And I'm telling you, he wouldn't be accepted in those circles because he's not one. But this is Multnomah County, and he knows what he has to say. So I guess that's what he's got going for him. Conrad, you brought up that this has been a historically challenging time. And I think that is really one of the biggest things that has allowed me to learn. I mean, talk about getting thrown into the deep end. Right away when I got started, the previous DA resigned. It was halfway through the protest. I had a community advisory group. I had a transition team that advised me on how to handle those protests. And there were a lot of different factors that my opponent wants to gloss over coming to that policy. One, like the Justice Center being closed down. So we couldn't process cases at that time. Arraignments were set 30 and 60 days out. We were in the middle of a pandemic. So, there's this idea where they want to paint like all these really challenging things happening as if they're related to our policies. The protest policy, I think, accomplished a lot of things that were good. But one of the things that I would have changed going back further would have been to work closer with law enforcement and just say, hey, we need to work together on this and have a strategy. We got there eventually when we stopped doing just the mass, disruption of the protests and targeting individuals who are actually doing the damage. But it took us a while to get there. And unfortunately, the city of Portland has had to endure a lot of lawsuits based on those actions and a lot of community members and their families and their homes being gassed. But there are always things that you can learn and do better. And I think now that I've been in this role for 3.5 years and having this experience, and that's the other thing, being the district attorney is running this office. It's not prosecuting cases. That's not relevant. I'm not even sure my opponent knows what being the DA is about.
When you said gas, do you mean tear gas? Okay, thank you for clarifying. Moving on, we're going to spend some time now on ballot measure 110. That's the drug decriminalization and treatment measure Oregonians passed in November 2020. As I'm sure most people know by now, Governor Tina Kotek signed legislation that once again makes drug possession a crime. That misdemeanor goes into effect on September 1st. Lawmakers say the bill is designed to push people into treatment, but the criminal penalty will carry up to 180 days in jail for people caught with drugs who don't or can't access treatment. So sort of with that background, Mike, you supported Measure 110 and moved to implement it about 1 month before it was set to go into effect back in December 2020. Now, going on 4 years later, you supported legislation that recriminalizes drug possession. What changed your mind?
Yeah, well, I think, like many people in Multnomah County, 75% of people voted for Measure 110. And I was one of them because we wanted the same thing. We wanted people to get access to treatment. And we saw that the criminal justice system was failing on that issue. Fast forward 3.5 years, the treatment still wasn't being connected. And we also saw some other unintended consequences on our streets, seeing people use drugs. So I pivoted on this issue. That's what leadership is. You take in new information and you go forward with what you think is the best plan to move the county forward. Open drug use created situations where people don't feel safe on our streets. The new misdemeanor is going to put a stop to that on September 1st when that gets up and running. But it's still like when I worked with legislators to craft this, it was very much trying to keep intact the referral to treatment at its core. And so it starts with deflection, and we're getting a $25 million drop-off center for law enforcement, something that people have been asking for a long time, finally is coming home now. And so that's going to be a place where people can be brought to get connected to those services and hopefully start that road to recovery. And if the drop-off center and deflection doesn't work, we built all throughout the law opportunities for people to avoid prosecution and conviction so long as they engage in those treatment resources. The other part that I'm excited about this bill is it fixes something that happened in a Court of Appeals case. It'll allow us to prosecute drug dealers. That actually went into effect the moment that the governor signed the law. So that is in effect today. Now we can go back to prosecuting people if they possess quantities of drugs with an intent to distribute. That's going to help us tamp down on the supply side of things, but also with the treatment center and getting people with the misdemeanor, we're hoping to get the open drug use on our streets also put to an end.
Thank you, District Attorney. Deputy District Attorney Vasquez, you've told me in the past that you supported a Class A misdemeanor for drug possession. Do I have that correct?
Yes.
Yeah. Which is punishable by up to 1 year in jail. That's stronger than the misdemeanor passed by lawmakers. Why push for that?
Yeah. Well, I want to start by saying, we should never be in a position where we have a leader of such an important office that's learning on the job. That's just really difficult to say. I mean, my 24 years of experience, I would certainly hope that people wouldn't be looking me to learn on the job. This is something where experience really matters, and we see this so clearly in how Schmidt brought Measure 110 forward. I didn't vote for that, and I certainly knew that it was going to have really negative consequences. Yes, the out-of-state special interest groups sold that to many Oregonians, and Mike Schmidt was at the forefront cheerleading for them, and taking their money and all along the way telling us how great it was going to be when we're watching people die on the streets, and it was terrible. And the fact that he could even sit here and talk about how he somehow helped out with this, it's quite frankly ridiculous. I mean, it was just February that he took $30,000 from the Drug Policy Alliance, an out-of-state special interest group that really pushed extremely hard for decriminalization of those very hard drugs that are leading us to where we're at right now. Now, when we talk about why a Class A misdemeanor, the reason is that a misdemeanor is still something that can be expunged, but also if you have experience and you have actually dealt with individuals struggling with substance abuse disorder, which I have for over 20 years, what you know is that it's a difficult process. They need lots of support. If you go to my website, you'll see I have a 6-point plan where I put out a whole support network, and I had that long before this amendment passed. The reason for a year is not that we would ever give anyone a year up front. It would be in very small increments. When people struggle, take 3 steps forward, 1 step back. You support them all along the way. You build treatment readiness dorms so that you can help in their process getting to sobriety and be the true supportive partner that we want. And that's what I'm looking to create.
Thank you. The legislation that recriminalizes drug possession and rolls back part of ballot measure 110 that was signed by the governor yesterday allows for counties to opt into diversion programs, into treatment and really away from the criminal justice system. Mike and many other DAs across the state have also signed a letter committing to some kind of diversion program. I realize it is early. I've talked to a couple of other district attorneys, and they say, you know, they're scrambling to kind of get things in order. But how do you anticipate diversion working, having committed to doing so?
Yeah. Well, first, just to circle back on my opponent's answer for a second, he says people need lots of support. That's coded language, and he uses coded language quite a bit. What he means is lots of jail time, and that's what he said, and that's why he supported the A misdemeanor. I worked with the legislature to craft 4002, and deflection is going to be a cornerstone of how this works. And so what deflection actually looks like on the street is going to be when somebody makes contact, a police officer makes contact with an individual, and they're possessing an amount of drugs, that they can say to them, they say, hey, look, we have some options here. You're not allowed to possess these drugs. That's a crime. I can take you to jail. That is something we can do. But we also have a drop-off center. We have this place that I can take you. And if you go and you do that, you won't face criminal prosecution as long as you connect with this drop-off center. So there's a lot of details still to work out with all of our partners, because we have to work with the law enforcement, with police officers, obviously with people in the defense bar and courts and other folks in Multnomah County. So there's more details that still need to come. And this is just happening right now. In fact, the Criminal Justice Commission just hosted their first webinar today on how to apply for money for grants, which is going to bring $2.5 million into our early implementation round to get that off the ground. So those conversations are just starting. But ultimately, what it's going to look like is giving law enforcement a new tool in the tool belt that they can bring somebody to actually get some support and help. And if that doesn't work, if the person walks away and they don't engage, then we can still file the charge. But then there's even another opportunity for something called conditional discharge that essentially allows people to complete treatment on pretrial. So they still don't have to be convicted of anything. And so long as they do that, my office will dismiss the charges because they will successfully complete a treatment. So at every stage in the game throughout this legislation, the focus is on getting people into treatment and not building up those collateral consequences that have impacted communities disparately.
Nathan, if elected, would you continue to commit to diversion? Just a yes or no. Would you kind of continue that commitment the county has made?
Absolutely.
And do you have different ideas or any thoughts about what the district attorney just outlined in terms of ways that diversion might look? Is it different?
It's not different. Here's the issue. What it comes down to is experience. And, sadly, this is an area again where Schmidt comes up short. Having done this job for over 2 decades, I've spent times not just in diversion courts, not just in the drug courts, not just dealing with individuals, but out on the streets with the officers, with the community-based organizations, really looking at, okay, what's going on and how do we best serve? And this is something where when we're creating these programs, you need someone that actually can say, hey, I've went out with individuals and seen them on the street, met them at their level. Because when you're dealing with individuals that are struggling with substance abuse disorder, no two are the same. You're going to need to really parse through a lot of very complex issues that I've dealt with for over 20 years. Are there mental health challenges? Are we building the right diversion court that can both adapt to the issues of the substance abuse disorder and to the mental health challenges? And then some individuals, you're right, they might be suitable for the deflection, and I absolutely support that and want that. But sadly, we're going to see a lot of folks that are deep in their addiction, and we're going to need to be, more proactive in how we deal with that. There's no coded language here. There's only a support network that wants to help people get to the end, which is that we want them to be clean and sober. We want them to be productive individuals of our community, but we're not going to do it with Pollyannish glasses on that doesn't have any experience or reality of what it's like, for the everyday person who's so struggling with addiction. You have to care, you have to believe, you have to get in there. And you have to also have that compassion to meet people where they are on the streets. Last night, I went out and I was with a group where we literally, I was down on bended knees talking to an individual who was passed out on fentanyl, asking them if they needed Narcan. And that's something that you're going to need, is that experience and that level of care. And that's what I'm dedicated to bringing to this community.
I actually have a quick follow-up question. I'm going to give you each a minute to respond to, just out of fairness. But you had mentioned this drop-off center District Attorney. Just to be clear, that's sort of a plan. It's not something that actually exists right now. So where would people go, say, this fall, if they come in contact with law enforcement? And I realize this is also getting worked out, across the county and across the state. So there may not be an answer, but where would people go starting September 1st if they come in contact with law enforcement? They're unwilling or then they want to be diverted. Where is this place that they're taken?
Yeah, so Conrad, we just had our first local public safety coordinating council, LIPSIC, we call it, meeting on this. I chaired that meeting, and that's exactly the type of conversation that we have to have. We're talking right now with especially the law enforcement side of things so that they can help us design something that's going to work for officers, because that's who's going to be using this is police officers for the most part. So that's the conversation that's happening. There's not a site, pre-selected. And quite frankly, we're expecting on September 1st that it's probably going to be bare bones. This is not going to be a place that has lots of beds and other things yet, because we need to build those things. We need to hire the people, and it takes time to staff up and do those things. So we're thinking that this is probably going to be a space where people can be brought, might even be a temporary location. But the idea is for there, they can be connected to the actual resource they need, whether that's detox, whether that's a residential bed, whatever it is that they are determined to need. That's the connection point, like a hub.
Nathan, is there anything you'd add to that? This idea that, starting in September, folks that want to be diverted from the criminal justice system, there may not be actually a facility to go. It could take years to build. So what would be your idea starting in September if you're elected?
It's something I've been talking about for a long time, that we need a sobering center. We haven't had one for years here in Multnomah County. I pushed hard and worked with a group called the Beacon Group to actually develop and bring that forward, about 2 years ago. What I'm shocked to hear by that is that we're here 4 years in and we need to build things. I mean, how can it be that the elected DA can sit here and tell us that he pushed forward Measure 110? We've seen record overdose deaths. We've seen a situation where there's just been an absolute desert of services for these individuals struggling. And now we're talking about still needing to build things. It's impossible that we can really look and say, where's the leadership? Why haven't we had a leader who has recognized problems and been out there actually looking to make the changes? Because this sobering center issue has been missing for a long time. This is nothing new. He should have been on this years ago.
This is a question that comes from our audience. And for most of these questions, there are various versions of it. So I'm kind of summarizing what folks have, one of the things folks are interested in hearing more about. But essentially, how has the public defense crisis, the fact that there aren't enough public defenders, affected your day-to-day work? And what sort of ideas as district attorney would you continue or bring to the table if to resolve the crisis? Is that something even that's within the power of the district attorney's office? And Nathan, this is first to you.
Yeah. Well, thank you. I really appreciate this question, because this is a pressing issue that really needs true leadership. And it's something that's been lacking, because we've been suffering kind of under this issue for at least the past few years. And just to put into a quick context for everyone, 3 years ago, the state legislature changed kind of the way in which our public defenders contracts work. And since that time, we've really had an issue where they've been refusing to take cases. And we've been in a situation where, the state legislature put in an extra $100 million and we haven't seen it move the needle. So we're in a situation where victims aren't getting justice. And defendants who are struggling and really need to have their case put through, they need justice as well. So it is important that this gets addressed. So my ideas, to be very clear, it's not to send out an email like the current elected DA does to say basically, hey, here are the cases that aren't getting done. It's actually to come up with real solutions. In the short term, what I propose is that we work with the civil bar. There's many just amazingly high paid and very skilled civil attorneys out there that have actually been prior criminal defense attorneys that have come forward and said that they'd be willing to take cases. Let's get them together. Let's put out the call. Let's do that. This is a time where as a community, we pull together and we deal with this in the short term. In the long term, it's going to take some real changes at the state level. We need actual transparency. The Willamette Week brought up this issue in an article where they actually evaluated, are the defense firms taking enough cases or not? We need to have that transparency. That can be written into different statutes. We need accountability about what cases they are taking and what cases they're not. What you need also is, while I can't hire defense attorneys, I can certainly be a voice at the legislature pushing for change, advocating for justice to make sure victims get their cases, put through the system where they need to be.
Nathan, I'm going to give you a minute to respond to this follow-up question that I have to you. The idea of the civil bar, though, is something that the former Chief Justice of the Oregon Supreme Court did try, and it almost got, it was panned, frankly, and it was sort of seen as almost, in the words of criminal defense attorneys, kind of offensive that, this is a specialty, being a criminal defense attorney as opposed to being a real estate attorney or a tax attorney or different specialties within law. So I guess, it's certainly an idea, but it has been tried. It seems to have not worked. Are there other, solutions that you might propose?
Just because one area has tried and maybe hasn't been successful doesn't mean it's not going to work. There are many, many civil attorneys out there that actually are skilled. And just because the criminal defense bar, who, if you look at who donates to Mike Schmidt, it's criminal defense attorneys. Really, if you want to, push past a problem, you're always going to meet a hurdle. I believe that. It's never about, are you going to meet a hurdle? It's how do you get past that? And of course, people are going to throw up roadblocks. But there are many, many skilled attorneys out there. And the fact that at one point someone said, oh, well, a tax attorney. Okay, what about all the plaintiffs' attorneys out there that have handled, thousands of criminal defense cases? Are you saying that they are not skilled or qualified to handle this? I think that's ridiculous. Of course they are. I know many very skilled attorneys, both former prosecutors and former defense attorneys, that could readily step in and do an amazing job. The question is not, can we? It's why aren't we doing it now?
Thank you. District Attorney, same question about just the public defense crisis in general. What have you tried, and basically what would you continue to do? Because this is a problem where statewide we're talking 2,500 people plus don't have a lawyer, and they're charged with crimes. And under the Constitution, state and federal, that's a requirement that is not being met in Oregon right now. So how would you? How do you continue to prosecute cases when knowing that people may not be getting those constitutional protections?
Yeah, Conrad, this has been such a plaguing challenge of our local system in Multnomah County. But like you say, in fact, the last I heard, Jackson County might lead the state in number of underrepresented individuals in their system. So it's hitting everybody. It's hitting all of Oregon. And what I've tried to do is early on, I think we were one of the first jurisdictions hit, probably because of the size and the volume that we handle. So getting to work with the legislature, also, having press conferences, getting the word out. That's what the district attorney can do, is kind of use the megaphone of our office to be able to raise the issue. We worked with legislators to try to enhance, let's not pretend that this happened overnight. The crisis came to our door overnight, but there's been decades of underinvestment in our public defense services. So this finally came to a head to the point where now we weren't seeing representation. That's why we got $90 million more invested in. And that is starting to show some results in terms of less turnover in the public defense ranks, people hopefully staying in that career path longer, because the more turnover you have, the more people you have to attract in. But there still needs to be more. The legislature absolutely has to continue to do more. We also advocated for, in this, the Office of Public Defense Services was moved to the executive branch. That takes effect on January 1st. I'm hopeful to see that underneath Governor Kotek's leadership, we'll see hopefully some changes happening there that will maybe improve some things. But like you said, when, my opponent was answering, the ideas he has are not new ideas. If those things could have worked, we would have been doing those. Not only did the Chief Justice try it, but multiple people in our local community have tried to put out the call. And it's just not working for a whole host of reasons. So what we need to do is continue to hold the legislature accountable, and then work with the governor's office to make sure that they have the funding that they need and carry the cases.
All right. And just a 1-minute follow-up, similar to what I did with Deputy District Attorney Vasquez. I don't recall, I could have missed it, but I don't recall a press conference about, the public defense crisis. And again, maybe I missed it, but, is that something you've done?
Yeah, that is something that we've done. There was a while there, Conrad, where we were doing kind of, I don't know if it was at a cadence of every other week, inviting the press to come into the agency and taking questions. It's been recurring.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Is there more you wanted to say? I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, I mean, I think, that's what a district attorney can do. We don't hire public defenders. That's not our role. In fact, that would be a conflict of interest. So when myself and the Oregon District Attorney President, Dan Primus, sat on the legislative committee, we were really trying to relay to them what was happening on the ground and what fixes we need to see happen. There still is a lot more that needs to be done to be able to have public defenders. So the legislature has more work to do, and so does the governor when it comes to her branch on January 1st.
Well, moving on, as we said at the onset of our conversation, the district attorney is the top law enforcement official in the county. A key part of that is management of an office charged with keeping the public safe. There have been some high-profile departures of women who have resigned from the office citing discrimination. In other cases, 2 internal surveys of employees in the Multnomah County District Attorney's office illustrate low morale and really a pretty disgruntled, frustrated staff based on the survey results. Mike, you've said in the past that these surveys had not been done before and that you took a risk in doing them in the first place. So what have you learned from these staff surveys? And if anything, what are you doing differently to address the concerns of your employees?
Yeah, so I think that whenever you take over an organization, especially one that had similar leadership for about 4 decades, you got to look at it critically and say, hey, what's going on? Look underneath the hood. That's what the surveys were about. We hired an equity director to implement those challenges and changes. And so we were looking at that. We see the areas where we need to make improvements. So since then, we've done office-wide microaggression trainings. We're also trying to focus on, low to no cost alternatives or ways that we can work on employee wellness. We've just completed our second of trauma trainings. So those are some of the areas that we're actually trying to be responsive to some of the feedback that we got in the surveys from employees. I mean, also, one of the things that I've done at the very beginning is my executive team looks a lot different than the previous administrations. It's a much larger executive team. It's more brought into different leaders from across the agency. It's actually majority female to male right now. We have multiple people of color, which is important because that helps, make sure that we're looking at equity throughout hiring and promotions and throughout the agency. So we also look back at our promotional data to see how we're doing on that, make sure that we're not unintentionally seeing any bias creep in there. We're looking at the promotions on the attorney side. They're about 50-50 in terms of male-female. On the administrative side, they're more female because we have a lot more female staff on the administrative side. And we're building out now the equity director position and adding an assistant to that work because it's so crucial to moving our agency forward. Culture change is hard, and this is work that has not been done historically in this office. So opening up the hood has been challenging. My opponent has been part of the people who are causing a lot of these morale issues in the agency. And I think that's one of the biggest challenges we face now.
Senior Deputy District Attorney Vasquez, you too are a supervisor in the office. What have you learned from these 2 separate surveys? And have you done anything different to address concerns of the prosecutors in the office that you supervise directly?
Yeah, let me take some of these on and just say, first, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. It's been a disaster under Mike Schmidt. His treatment of women is atrocious. It is no surprise that many women have left this office because, when you see repeated claims of gender discrimination, it's hurtful. And it is a situation where this is it is rampant. And even when he's talking about his management team, even recently, one of his own senior manager, a chief deputy, filed complaints about retaliation against Mike Schmidt. It has been just abhorrent by his behavior. And the idea that he put these equity surveys out to look under the hood because he'd just taken over, he didn't even do these surveys until like 2023, or at least several years after he got into office, several years after people had experienced his management. He hired an equity manager that left after a year, mainly because he wasn't being supported. It's because of the management failures of Mike Schmidt that you see these problems over and over. It should be no shock to anyone that the union endorsed me after hearing from Mike Schmidt and hearing from me. They voted to endorse me because they've had an opportunity to see his management style. They've had an opportunity to experience the problems. And of course, when they talk to the folks that under me that I have supervised, I've seen help them get to promotions. I've pushed them forward. It is a situation where my goal is to support the employees that I work with. And I always am planning for their future and how to help them obtain their employment goals. And it is, of course, at the forefront of my mind because I'm a member of the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Board. And I always work to challenge my employees to do better, to help each other reach our goals. And it's something that sadly, Mike Schmidt has failed at repeatedly.
And just a quick point of clarification, are you a member of the union that endorsed you or not?
I am a member of that union. Absolutely.
Yep. And senior manager, like District Attorney Schmidt, you are not a member of the union?
Yeah, that's correct, Conrad. I'm not part of the union.
Okay, great. This is another audience question. Got a couple versions of this. Senior Deputy District Attorney Vasquez, you've been endorsed by a number of the law enforcement unions. I think the Portland Police Bureau, Gresham Police, I believe the Multnomah County Sheriff's Office has also endorsed you. How will that endorsement affect your positions?
Affect my positions. It will certainly not change my approach. I've always been the same prosecutor that I've been for 20 plus years. I'm someone that believes that, if we truly want to move forward this discussion, you need a leader who is willing and ready to actually kind of build a bridge, because I fully recognize that there are members in our community that don't trust law enforcement. And I've worked out in those community groups. And what I haven't seen in the past 4 years is a leader that's building a bridge between law enforcement and those community groups. And this is what we need. Is someone that can really put a hand out to each side and say, let's come together and really address some of these tough issues. Is it that, they have seen my 20 plus years of work and that the firefighters, that, the law enforcement officers, the everyday officers, that they support me? Absolutely. It's countywide because they've seen 4 years of Schmidt and they've seen the problems that we're experiencing firsthand. What my goal is to be the person that builds the bridge that can move us forward. Our community has been struggling with that for years, and particularly since 2020. But yet we have not seen any real significant efforts by our elected DA to do that because he's fractured relationships so horribly with the police. The everyday officer has zero trust in him. And so what you need now is a leader that can build trust, can build community, and bring those sides together. Because what I want to see is a system where people can believe in, a system where people feel that they can trust the everyday police officer, and the everyday officer gets to know the everyday community members that may help them bring and deliver public safety. Because that's how we do this, is we act as a bridge builder, not as someone like the elected DA who's really torn those apart.
District Attorney Schmidt, you have not been endorsed by the law enforcement unions in the county. I guess, what does the lack of the endorsement say about you and your candidacy?
Well, I think, the law enforcement agencies didn't endorse me last time, and they haven't endorsed me this time. We've had opportunities where we've had to hold police officers accountable for conduct. That's challenging, and you need a DA who understands that these are two different systems, two agencies for a reason. They're not the same thing because we have different jobs, we have different roles, and we need to work together and we need to be collaborative. But also, we're not taking orders from one or the other. So that's important that you have that autonomy. my opponent wanted to talk about building bridges with the community. And if you look at my endorsements, you see all of the community groups of Multnomah County represented. In fact, those same community groups described his policies as a return to broken windows policing and the tactics of Rudy Giuliani. So when he talks about having a handout to both, he's not actually having a handout to anybody except for the police agencies who are endorsing him. I, on the other hand, have a broad swath of support from people like Building Power for Coalitions of Community Color and Basic Rights Oregon and Latino Network, and it goes on and on and on. Not to mention the elected leaders from our community, legislative, our county commission. These are the things that the district attorney needs to be successful. You need to have people that you can work together to get what we need to have, which is resources, policy changes. And look, I work closely with police officers too. We have regular meetings with the chief and his team. I get to go out on ride-alongs. I'm heading out next week to go with Officer Bear with the bike squad. I'm excited about that. I'm hoping I can keep up. I'm not sure. But, we're working on building those bridges. When I went out on New Year's Eve and we did street racing takeovers, I heard from the North Precinct commander how expensive those missions are. I went to the Criminal Justice Commission. I got them a $100,000 grant so they can run more missions. So we're working with police closely on our task force and otherwise. But I have the broad support of the entire community.
Moving on, Mike, restorative justice was one of the priorities I recall us talking about back in 2020 during your campaign and thereafter. And I'm only aware of one case that went through that process. This is kind of a diversion type disposition where the case doesn't kind of go through the traditional sentencing process, but more focused on the victim and the perpetrator kind of having some agreement that they both feel resolves the case outside of the judicial system. And the one I'm aware of involves a Portland police officer. I know this was a priority. I mean, are there other cases? And if not, why not?
Yeah, we've got, as far as I'm aware, about a dozen or so cases that are at various levels of process. Some, at least a few, are completed at this point, and then some are still at various stages. I think why not is kind of a complicated answer. One is this is all about being survivor centered. And so we're out there and we need to talk to victims and even make them aware of what this is. And we have to explain what this means. And so when people have been able and willing to take us up on it, we've had really good results. In fact, I was just at this past week, restorative justice kind of a convening in the evening. And one of the victims got on stage, who was one of our cases, and he talked about how powerful it was to actually go through a process where he got help for the trauma that he experienced. He got counseling help, and then he got talked through with professionals of what going through a restorative justice process with the person who harmed him would be like. And at the end, they got to a place where they could at least find common ground and understanding. And he felt like that was incredibly meaningful to him in his healing process. I think getting more and more stories out like that and making victims aware that this is an option for them. But look, it's got to be survivor centered. It's got to be focused on the victim. They have to want to do that. And so part of it is us getting the word out, making it available. We just got in this latest short session cycle a continued investment into restorative justice programs. So now we know that we will have the fundings to continue this program. And so, that's one of the things that as I get into my second term, I'm really looking forward to looking at what the criteria is. What are the bottlenecks? How can we do a better job at describing this program to victims to see if they really understand what it is and that it's an option available to them? Because all the research is clear. When you go through this, survivors and victims have much higher, satisfaction than they do in the traditional process.
Senior Deputy District Attorney Vasquez, you oversee the restorative justice program? Is that correct? That's part of your portfolio, or is that not true?
It's housed in my unit, and my co-senior deputy actually handles that. What I'll tell you is that.
Well, let me just quick. Oh, go ahead.
Yep.
Sorry. Yeah, I just wanted to ask the question. I mean, just wanted to confirm that. Yeah, I mean, if you were elected, would you explore this more, or is it not something that is a priority for you, restorative justice?
No, sir. So with restorative justice, let's look at this. 4 years, 12 cases, that's nothing. I mean, that's ridiculous and it's shameful. We should look at, really, if you want to believe in restorative justice, we should be delivering this on a regular basis. And the problem is the way it's structured, quite frankly. If we had a truly a victim-based system, we could deliver it and actually have more cases go through. But right now, it's only the way it's structured. It's structured actually to take on just the most violent cases, where really, if we were dealing with looking at cases like car thefts or other type of theft cases, you would actually have an opportunity to help a lot of folks kind of that are really starting out in the criminal justice system, to divert them out through a restorative justice process. And typically victims tend to be a lot more receptive to that when they're starting out in the process there. So the fact that we're only talking about 12 cases that Schmidt's, because of the way he structured it, that's difficult. I mean, it really is. And, we had actually a program that was a wonderful area in which we brought a lot of restorative justice type behavior forward. But it really went away under Schmidt. And that was a community court process. We were, dealing with about 4,000 cases a year through community court. We were dealing with people that would come in, they'd plead guilty to crimes like theft, criminal mischief. If they went and they did community service, they could get their case dismissed. It was a great program because it brought about accountability and compassion, because you could also do things like connect them with treatment, with mental health. And it was a way to actually get people to get both that right aspect of giving back to the community, the restorative part, but taking accountability. Under my administration, yes, we're going to continue restorative justice, but we're actually going to deliver it in a meaningful way to the community, not in some kind of soundbite, wow, we did 12 cases.
Ultimately, you're both senior prosecutors and I should say this is our last question before we go to closing remarks. Ultimately, you're both senior prosecutors in the Multnomah County District Attorney's office. And from that standpoint, I mean, you are on the same side. Has this campaign for district attorney affected your ability to work together to improve public safety? Are you able to work together? And if so, how?
Who do you want to go first, Conrad?
Mike, sorry, District Attorney.
Okay. Well, just to finish off that last question, it's clear that my opponent doesn't actually understand what restorative justice is. Community court was not a restorative justice model. Any practitioner with the basics would tell you that. He wants to disguise community service as restorative justice. So he's got some homework to do, but I'm not too surprised about that. Your question, to be frank, Conrad, we work together, but we're not seeing each other on a regular basis. Nathan oversees a unit that's very important to me. It's one of the units that I've invested most heavily in the office. We've added our MAPS attorneys into that unit. We've added another senior deputy DA because there's so many people to supervise in that unit. And so I say, before this, we would have normal conversations and work together closely. Since then, we probably don't interact as much in terms of having conversations with each other, but, nobody's, elbow checking anybody down the hallway or anything like that. It's professional. It's hi, how you doing? So in that way, I think my take is that I think we handle it professionally within the office because we know we have work to do. And this work is about the people of Multnomah County and working on public safety. It's not about, our personal disagreements in this situation. So we keep it professional and I think that works just fine.
Nathan, same question. Has the campaign for district attorney affected your ability to work together to improve public safety? Nathan, can you hear me?
Waiting for my timer.
Waiting for the timer. Fair enough. Yeah.
There we go.
Okay.
All right. So no, it hasn't. I would say that we do keep it very professional in the office. I would agree. Certainly, this would be one point I would agree with Mr. Schmidt that when I see him in the office, I'm going to say hi because I'm always going to try to make sure that the employees around me are not feeling discomfort from what I'm doing. Has it created a good working relationship? No. It's not easy to call out your boss and say very clearly that his policies have failed, that the crime rates are out of control, that I don't approve of his, these gender discrimination claims that keep coming forward, that I see his treatment of how the employees are in the office is atrocious. So it doesn't make it easy, but at the same time, I'll say that, there's just, not a lot of interaction. In fact, this past year, I did 4 major trials. I did a triple homicide murder trial. I did a double homicide murder trial. I did a sexual assault trial, and I prosecuted a Proud Boy. I didn't see Mike a lot. He wasn't in the office a whole lot. I don't know where he goes or what he does. It's not my job to keep track of him, but I do know because I've seen, recently there was some public records request where they asked for our card swipes, and I could see clearly he wasn't in the office. So it's, it's for me, it's not too bad. If I don't have to see him and deal with him, I mean, it's, I'm there doing my job, and I'm dedicated to this community, delivering justice to victims and delivering justice to this community. And that's what I'm focused on. And of course, I'm not going to make it uncomfortable for the other employees in the office. And, like I said, the employees, I would say, particularly the attorneys, they've spoken. They have chosen and voted to support me because they support my effort to bring about change for our community, because it's so essential and so vital that we make the change at this time.
We're going to move now to closing remarks. District Attorney Schmidt, you went first at the beginning of the program. So Senior Deputy District Attorney Vasquez, you're going to go first in your closing remarks, and then we'll go to the District Attorney, and then I have a few closing remarks and we're done. So Senior Deputy District Attorney Vasquez, your closing remarks.
Well, thank you again, Conrad, and to the City Club. I really appreciate it. And I'm here to tell you today that Portland's best days are ahead of us. And that really comes down to if we elect the right leaders. We're at a critical time in our history, and the time for change, particularly in this office, is now. We've endured over 3 years of rampant crime, unchecked open-air drug dealing, and drug use under Mike Schmidt. There's been smashed windows. We've had businesses flee us constantly. And people, sadly, in our own community are afraid to be here. We've lost 3% of the population, and multiple surveys have said people are afraid to come downtown. Before you, in May, there are 2 paths, and, there's a clear choice. Mike Schmidt's path is one that's lined with lots of discrimination, retaliation, and mismanagement, a lot of failed policies, rampant crime, and I'm here to tell you today, what you are experiencing, what you are feeling, it's real out there. It is. And don't let Mike Schmidt or anyone else tell you it's not. We need to change. We need to get back to a healthy, safe community. My path forward offers hope and safety through actual collaboration and real experience. I'm the only one here that's actually taken on serious crime and delivered serious results for victims and communities. And when you look, you'll see that victims endorse me because they believe in the work that I do. I'm asking you to join me on this collective journey as we build a compassionate system, but one where accountability matters, where victims are valued and are at the forefront, where safety is enjoyed by all across the spectrum. I know that the people that are listening here are dedicated towards working towards this future, and I'm just asking that you join me in making this change at this time so that we can move forward into a community that we can all enjoy and be proud of.
Thank you, Senior Deputy District Attorney Nathan Vasquez, and District Attorney Mike Schmidt, your clear closing remarks. Let's wait for the timer. Go ahead.
Thanks again to everyone for being here. Thank you, Conrad, for moderating, and to the City Club for hosting, and to my opponent, Nathan Vasquez, for taking part in this important conversation. I'm a husband, I'm a father of 2 boys, live right here in Portland. I love this community, and I want to see it emerge from the challenges of the last few years stronger, safer, and healthier. Since my election in 2020, I built back a district attorney's office that had been ravaged by decades of budget cuts. I've increased office capacity and our prosecution rates year over year, every single year since taking office. What that means is we are getting through our case backlogs, we're holding offenders accountable, and securing justice and closure for more victims. When we saw gun violence rise during the pandemic, we launched a new homicide unit to dedicate more capacity to prosecuting violent crime. And we launched an innovative new partnership with OHSU to get ahead of the issues and look at prevention. This is about making sure our community can thrive free from the fear of gun violence, and our work isn't over until we get there. I'm working on launching a brand new diversion program to help survivors of domestic violence move forward. Multnomah County needs to be a place where every woman, every child, every person knows that when they need help getting safely away from an abusive situation, the resources are going to be there to help them. We're building a new program to address homelessness. We'll partner with service providers to help people expunge their records to reduce homelessness and housing insecurity. And I'm partnering with lawmakers and law enforcement to stop public drug use and connect people with treatment. That means we can start to turn the tide and see safe and clean streets, and that most of our vulnerable community members are getting the help that they need, not suffering on our sidewalks. We need steady leadership in the district attorney's office that can meet the challenges that we face and move us forward. We can't go backwards. There's more work to do. I'm ready to do it. Let's move forward together. Thank you.
Well, with that, I'd like to thank Mike Schmidt and Nathan Vasquez for joining us this evening. And thanks to the City Club of Portland for hosting this important conversation. And thanks to each of you for watching. We really do appreciate your time, your questions, and your interest in this important race. You can view a recording of this forum and others at the City Club website. On April 12th, the City Club is hosting a Oregon State Treasurer Democratic primary debate. It's in person. Doors are at 11:30. The program starts at 12:15 at the University Place Hotel and Conference Center in downtown Portland. And as a reminder, most important, the deadline to register to vote is April 30th. Ballots will be mailed May 1st. This primary election is May 24th. So please vote. I'm Conrad Wilson with OPB. Good night.